Thanks everybody for joining us for this third podcast of Spoken from the Underground. Today we're going to be covering our origins in music and how we got into it. We've developed a set of questions that all of us are going to answer. So without further ado, welcome to our origins in music.
All right. So first question I got for you, my friend, is what age did you get into music?
Well, fortunately for me, I was into music from go because my dad is a singer-songwriter, and at the time that I was born, he was pretty heavy into the blues and rock and jazz scene in Saskatoon. He was a spunky young guitar player, and so right from birth, I was exposed to music from him. I remember when I was 3 years old, there's a place in Saskatoon called Bud's on Broadway, and my dad had bought me a little ukulele, and he took me there one Saturday when people were jamming, and he brought me up on stage, and I sat on this little stool pretending I could play this ukulele, and everybody was in the crowd like, yeah, clapping, and that was my first experience really in the live kind of music scene. After that, when I was 7 years old, was my first time in 1991 that I entered a studio and got up on the mic. My dad brought me in because he was recording a song called Big Dream.
I got my own son now, he's 7 years old. He's a lot like me, he never does what he's told. But I hope he finds what he's looking for when he packs up his bags, just walking out the door. I'll say, hey Justin, what this song really means: don't you ever give up on your big dreams. Don't you ever give up on your big dreams.
He had me sing at the end of it because he was talking about me in the song. Unfortunately, I don't have that version anymore. I haven't had that since the 90s, but my dad re-recorded that song, only it doesn't feature me on it anymore. But that's basically how I started getting into music, was through my dad.
So that kind of ties into the next question. Who would you say your biggest influences are?
Well, aside my dad and the local musicians where I was growing up, which was a lot of guys that I knew, getting into like outside of my local area when I started listening to other types of music. As far as instrumentally, people who influenced me the most since I started as a drummer would be Dave Grohl. And just because watching him play live, he's like a human metronome. Like he plays on time. He drives the song forward. He's not so much of a technical player as he is just a driving force that just stays on time. Like a drummer you can rely on no matter what. And then there's Brad Wilk, who is the drummer from Rage Against the Machine. And for me, he was like the perfect balance between being technical and being a driving force in the band. So I really gravitated towards his style of drumming. And then there's Abe Cunningham, who's the drummer from Deftones. What struck me about him is he has a really driving style to the way he plays, but he has a really unique way of finding unique rhythms. Abe Cunningham really to be a driving drummer, but to try and come up with ways to be original as well. Then there's David Silveria, who's the drummer from Korn, and for me, he was a very technical drummer, and the drumming that David did is how I learned how to do accents, like on the snare and different rolls and different fills on the toms and stuff like that. Like he puts a lot of effort into his technicality of his playing, so he really inspired me like that. And then we got Wes Borland, the guitarist from Limp Bizkit. He's just such a unique guy, and just such a unique style of playing that, you know, even if it was just him playing by himself, I would still listen, because he's just he has such a unique style of the way that he scales when he's playing, and just little hammer-ons and offs. Just stuff that he does is really great, and he's always inspired me. Then there's a guy named Geir Jensen, who's from Norway. This guy makes a lot of ambient music that's instrumental, but he also samples stuff like dialogue from like really old movies, and then he'll put it in these instrumental songs that he makes. Totally responsible for inspiring me in the ambient side of things with music. Creative isn't the right word to describe what he does. He just takes things to the next level with the way he composes, the soundscapes that he combines with the music in his songs is just really unique. His artist name is Biosphere. The next two people are Japanese composers who really inspired me throughout my life. First one is Nobuo Uematsu, and he composed a lot of the music for Final Fantasy and those series of games. He's also done a lot of stuff with live orchestras, and he's just phenomenal, just an incredible composer, really inspired me. The next Japanese composer is Yasunori Mitsuda, and he composed all the music for Chrono Trigger, which is my other favorite game. And he was under Nobuo Uematsu's wing. I really enjoyed his work as well. The last guy instrumentally for me was Trent Reznor. Just a really in-depth, well-rounded producer and musician. He kind of has like a really narrow vision of how he wants to articulate his music, but he has a broad way in which he extracts his vision. Really created his own kind of sound, and so for that reason, he inspired me. As far as lyrically goes, for my biggest influences, David Gilmour, I'd have to put right up there, who's from Pink Floyd. The guy's just a legend, a pioneer, and he's still going to this day, and he's just done so much. Just an amazing, phenomenal musician, a great man, and really inspired me. Kurt Cobain is another, for obvious reasons. He was the voice of angst for a generation, and I mean that's all I really need to say about that. Dallas Green is another huge one. He's a Canadian, and I'm from Canada, so really intensely powerful music this guy puts out. He can pick up an acoustic guitar, start singing, and he'll grab you and just enthrall you in his music, and he's just incredible songwriter and lyricist. After that goes Zach De La Rocha from Rage Against the Machine. Again, another voice of angst for a generation who I just connected with and really admired his tenacity to push forward and to write the way that he wrote politically and to stand up for what they believed in. And Zach I still will always respect because he's a pioneer in the field of rock and hip hop coming together. After that we got Tupac, and for obvious reasons, don't got to go too deep into that. Another pioneer lyrically for the same reasons, just did things his own way and laid it down and carved a path and made it happen. The last but not least on this list would have to be DMX. DMX wrote songs that I've never heard other artists write. Very deep, very impactful lyrics, especially when he starts writing about his family or when he's writing about God. Just very profound lyrics that nobody can touch. So DMX is basically solely responsible for inspiring me to write and say whatever's in my heart, and without any fear of reprisal, and to just put it out there. And nobody else quite did that like DMX did for me, and he'll always have a special place in my heart.
I guess that kind of ties into this next one here. What is your favorite album of all time?
Ooh, this was a very hard question for me to answer. This very difficult. My favorite album of all time would have to be Biosphere Substrata that Geir Jensen made, because it is just such a vividly powerful experience when you listen to it. It takes you to the warm places, it takes you to the cold places, it takes you every place. And it's a majority of it is instrumental. And as I mentioned, this guy just has a really special knack for ambient music and soundscapes and textures and things like that. And out of all the albums I've ever had in my life, I probably listen to that one on loop the most out of anything. So Biosphere Substrata, check it out.
Is it fair to say that album is responsible for the birth of perceptual sound as we now know it?
Yes, sir. Absolutely it is. Absolutely 100%. Biosphere inspired me to create Perceptual Sound, which is very similar in its approach, that it's ambient, instrumental, and it's basically designed to take you through certain experiences. So yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you, Biosphere, because I love that stuff. Still waiting for album number 3, bro. Still waiting.
Yeah, I'm working on it. It's coming. I'm working on it.
All right. So my next question, what was the first instrument you played?
First instrument that I played would be an acoustic guitar, because my dad was a guitar player. But the first instrument that I owned and actually, committed myself to master as best as I could would be a drum kit. And I'll never, ever forget when I first got my first drum kit. My dad, about a month before he got it for me, he's like, I'm going to get you a drum kit in about a month. So start getting ready to learn it. And so I went back to my room and I started listening to all my favorite songs that I would always listen to. But this time I was only listening for the drums in these songs. And I started really analyzing everything in my head and going, how are they doing these beats? What is the right hand doing? What is the foot doing? What's the left hand doing? And I started to try and understand in my mind how to do these beats and these songs that I'm listening to. And what I did was, actually, I took a piece of paper and I wrote, on the top kick, and I wrote underneath that hi-hat, and then underneath that I wrote snare. And I made a graph where I gave it like this much length, and I made little tiny boxes going throughout this graph. And I started to draw out drum patterns of the songs that I was listening to, trying to learn. Okay, I can hear that the hi-hat's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I would draw that out in my little graph there, and I can hear the kicks going do, 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 do. So I started drawing that out in the kick, and then I started drawing out where the snare was going, yada yada, and actually started figuring out how these drums were happening in these songs that I was listening to. The funny thing about that is a couple of years later, FL Studio, which back then was called Fruity Loops, first released their software, and their sequencer looked exactly like how I drew out these drum beats. And so I had drawn out all these drum beats and all these pieces of paper and taped them up on the wall all around my drum kit, where it was set up in my basement of my dad's house. And I would just sit there for hours looking at these and practicing on my drums and learning these beats. That would be my first instrument that I really spent time with and mastered.
So what was your first actual song you made?
I poured over this one. There's a lot of songs in what we call the archives and the lost tapes nobody will ever hear.
The rarities, B-sides.
Rarities, yeah. We'll say those don't count. Having said that, in the realm of perceptual sound, which is that ambient music we were talking about, and then hip-hop, I was doing those both at the same time. And so the first complete song that I did for perceptual sound, I was using delta waves, which is binaural, and it's a song called As I Turned Away. That was the very first song I completed for Perceptual Sound. And the first hip-hop song that I ever completed would be a song that I called Kayla's Song. It's a song I wrote for my daughter. I took a audio recorder when she was born, and I recorded the first sounds that she made after she was born. And I put that into an intro of a song. 2 weeks after she was born, I wrote this song.
I once held the weight of the world on my shoulders. Got a little harder when I got a little older, but it don't matter no more. She changed my world. Yeah, cause she's my baby girl. And one tell the weight of the world on my shoulders. Got a little harder when I got a little older, but it don't matter no more. She changed my world. Yeah, cause she's my baby girl.
Those are my first pieces of real work.
All right, so what was your first full-length album?
First full-length album was Perceptual Sound Regeneration. And with that, I wanted to do the binaural genre, which essentially is you're working with beta waves, alpha waves, theta waves, and delta waves. And these are all different brain waves that occur in your brain. So you take these waves and you make songs with them to amplify that state. So when people listen to those songs, it induces that particular brainwave frequency in their brain.
So the next question I got here is, what was your first live performance?
First live performance came in elementary school with a friend of mine, Jordan Cook. We did a talent show in grade 1 and also in grade 2. But my dad had given Jordan guitar lessons when he was really young. And we ended up doing a talent show where Jordan sang Mustang Sally while he was playing his guitar. And I couldn't play guitar at that point, so I just did backup vocals for him. So I was standing there on the mic, Mustang Sally, with Jordan. And that was the first musical performance I ever had. After that, as far as like outside of school goes, Bud's on Broadway in Saskatoon, they had open jams on I believe they still do, open jam days on Saturdays, 3 p.m. to 6 or 7 p.m. I believe it was. And I would go there with my dad or with Jordan or whoever every Saturday, and we'd jam there at Bud's on Broadway.
Nice. I didn't even know that about you, bro.
Learn something new every day.
That's right. Next one here is, what is your most meaningful composition?
This is a tough question for me because Kayla's song is very meaningful. It means a lot to her and to me, but I've made other music as well. Like I've done some remixes that have really reached a lot of people, and that I've received a lot of comments from people like, wow, this really touched me. Thank you for making this. And that means a lot to me too. On yet another hand, all my perceptual sound music that I've made, equally I've received a lot of messages from people about that. That music, perceptual sound, is selling every month on iTunes and Amazon and streaming on every conceivable place and everything else, which is also very meaningful to me. So really hard to pick between those three. I don't think I can. It's just gonna have to be grouped together. Kayla's song, some of those remixes that I've done in the past, and my perceptual sound work. I really can't pick one.
All right, well, this next question is going to probably be pretty tough too, maybe then. So what's your favorite collaboration?
This actually is not that tough of a question because there's a gentleman in Germany. His name is Falk. Say it, Lars. What's his name?
Falk Schwarz.
See, I can't do that. I can't make a roll like that. Yeah, there's a guy from Germany who's a producer, and his producer name is Attack with an E on the end. And he contacted me, and he wanted to collaborate, and I had never collaborated with anybody before. And he's like, let's do an EP, a Nine Inch Nails Ghost remix album, like an EP. And we used Dropbox to do that, and it was the craziest, awesomest, dopest experience I had ever had at that point, up until that point in my life. We literally went back and forth on Dropbox between layers. Like I would send him the drums, he would send the bass, I would do some piano, he would do some synthesizers, he would do this, I would do that. We'd go back and forth with layers in the song until it was full. And we went through 6 songs like that. And had I not collaborated with Attack, I probably would have never got the idea to form ILP. So for that very reason, it's my favorite collaboration, because it was a big chunk of work and we worked efficiently, and it was all good, great experience, and it ended up giving me the idea for ILP later. So definitely that collaboration was my favorite.
I totally forgot about that, but I can now, looking back, remember you working on those back in the day. So the next one I got is, what's your creative vision for the future?
My creative vision for the future basically is to just stay the course, just to be as ambitious as possible, and to keep letting limitations force innovation. That's basically my plan. It's not too much tweaking or changing I want to do. I mean, we're being pretty ambitious, and we're getting a lot of stuff done. But just to keep pressing forward relentlessly, and to just keep digging my feet in the ground and just keep putting out that good music, and that's about it.
Well, we all look forward to that. Still waiting for that third album, bro.
It's coming, man. It's coming. It's coming. All right, Lars, so let's get to you next. First question for you is, what age did you get into music?
I was 9 years old. And then my father came home with a steel pan, and my mom was like, "What did you bought?" He was like, I want to start to play. And he made some practice, whatever, and I looked at it and looked at the notes. Took the sticks. He was like, when did you practice that? It was the first time. It's good.
Nice.
That's funny you say that. Actually, when my dad got me my drum kit, because I had practiced so much before in my mind figuring things out, I sat down. The very first thing I did was a 4/4 beat, and he looked at me and goes, "Where did you learn that?"
I just looked at the notes. Was on the right side, and the notes was written down on the steel pan itself, and then I started playing and was like, "Hey, that." What? Is this right, Dad? Yeah, that's right. In some ways, so, yeah.
In some kind?
Not in some kind, some ways.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the first step into music.
Okay. Who are your biggest influences in music?
Our biggest influences, some of the old school rappers and groups like Cunning Linguists.
Oh, nice.
Cunning Linguist, Master Ace, and also some big ones. My first album was, what was this album? The album with Clinging out of a Classic from Eminem.
The Eminem Show?
My first album was the Eminem Show. And this was a big influence for me, just like 8 Mile, etc. Also, a big influence was Emancipator.
Okay.
It's a producer. He makes some ambience in a hip hop style, and it's really interesting to hear all these little details and. So, sometimes it's something backwards and here, and it's awesome to hear it. And I think I figured out some techniques for myself to produce music as I was hearing his music.
So it inspired you quite a bit.
He inspired me quite a bit, yeah.
Okay.
I'm actually impressed that you said Cunning Linguists, because I haven't heard that group name in like 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cunning Linguist is one of my favorites. So, I mean, like songs like Death Valley or the whole album Rap for Food. It's
Rap for Food.
Yeah.
That's where that comes from.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, they get beats. They are so. They go in your mind, and they stay there. And sometimes I hike up a mountain, I put my headphones in, and you can really enjoy all all your surroundings. These are pretty my influences, and so yeah.
In some kind.
Can.
I think you already touched on this a little bit, maybe. But what was your first instrument?
My first instrument was a steel pan, as I said. And I still have it, the same one.
Do you?
I still have it. I have it.
Nice. The original steel pan.
You gonna give us a little show?
Here it is.
He's got it. Wow.
Oh,
That's awesome.
it's made from a steel pan builder from England. This and the emotional part. Wow, why I don't want to sell it or give it away.
Yeah.
Sentimental.
Yeah.
Keep
Yeah.
it. It's nostalgic for you.
Yeah, I still have to from our band after that. It still works.
Nice.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, I was at 3 different steel bands at the same time. Because they love my style and how I play it and how good I play it and whatever. I was at the Switzerland Steel Pan Festival. I was at the World Expo '02. I was involved, really. But after all, puberty hits and steel pan sucks and bullshit.
All right, cool. Thanks for sharing. So, what was your first full-length album?
This was with the steel band.
Oh, nice.
We made an album,
Nice.
13 songs on it. You can see I was this old here in the under corner.
Huh.
Wow.
But we was like 24 people, players.
So, I'm guessing that'll tie into the next question then. When was your first live performance?
I have no fucking idea. I just know in these days, back in the days, there was... My friends was, hey, can you come out? Let's play. No, I must go to a gig or on a festival or some there or whatever. We had a lot of gigs. It wasn't not just 3 or 4 in a year. It was like 20 or to 50 in a year. Free time was gone. We had some good experiences with other peoples and stuff like that.
Okay, so what was your most meaningful composition?
My most meaningful composition wasn't on the steel pan.
Yeah.
One moment, that was now 6 years ago, and my best friend made suicide, and it was a little bit a creepy moment because I came home from work, opened FL Studio, began with a new track, composed it, and was like, dude, that's awesome. That's more than only awesome. It's an opus. It has so much soul and everything. As I have finished the composing, my phone was dead because because I had no more battery, and I received a message from my best friend. Hey, dude. It was it was such a good experience to know you and everything, but goodbye, have a good life. I tried to call him and he's freaking out a little bit, but let's see what's tomorrow. Half an hour later, his mother called me. Yeah, Johnny is dead. I was like, but this composition, pretty close to another. And it's a little bit scary in some in some kind.
All right, well, thanks for sharing that with us. What was your favorite collaboration?
I had contact with a guy that named Adriano, and we had together our own studio, and it was awesome to work there and to work with him. And he wrote texts I produced, and so many years ago he won a contest. Then he had some hits in the radio. After all, he was he going down and was like a normal person again. I met him over a friend. He was like, "Dude, you're doing a pretty good job with composing and producing. So, would you like to collaborate?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, do it." And we made a song, but never recorded it. After a time, he get me a job in his company that he worked. And after all that, I had some troubles with the chef there. And I told him, "Dude, help me." And he was like, "No, fuck you. Why I should help you?" I was like, I'm new here and I'm in trouble because you bring me to this company. And he was like, "Dude, you know what?" He recorded all of it, what I said and whatever, sent it to the chef, and
Fired?
I was fired.
What a great friend.
Hey, it was such a great friend after all, I must say. Wow.
He was your favorite collaboration, and he got you fired.
It was so inspiring at this time, and we worked so well together. It was great.
And then he flipped on you as soon as you needed something from him.
Yeah, only because it's go over the job, and
Wow.
there we are.
So, Lars, what is your creative vision for the future?
Would you be mad when I say I don't know?
Nope, that's cool.
I don't really know. I don't know where my path is, but when I see an opportunity to make something new, why not? Let's try it. Give it a try. If it work out, good. If it not work out, next.
All right, let's throw it over to Malachi. So, what age did you get into music?
I would say that it came in spurts. The different ages where I was introduced to music. The earliest I can think of was at age 5. Just listening to hip-hop, old school hip-hop. We're talking Run DMC and the Fat Boys, and learning the beatbox. That's when I think that's when I actually started learning how to get into music and learning beats at age 5. But then not much really happened after that. It wasn't until age 8 when my mom got me my first keyboard. It was this Casio keyboard with an 8-bit synthesizer. And it was just
Nice.
really old school. But on that keyboard, my mom taught me how to play the nursery song "Mary Had a Little Lamb" using just 3 white keys. And of course, now I can make it sound like a whole orchestra. A whore. Make it sound like a whore.
She screams when I press those keys.
Okay, that escalated quickly, dudes.
But make it sound like a whole orchestra playing Mary Had a Little Lamb. But it all started with just those 3 keys.
Yeah.
And from there, I got more into music, but it still did not progress as much. Not until age 13, when the movie Mortal Kombat, when it was a live action movie, first came out, and I started listening to the music in that movie, wanted the original soundtrack, got that CD, an actual compact disc, and started really getting into the music. That's when the whole world of electronic music was introduced to me. And ever since then, I started really getting into what makes this music. How did these composers, did these bands put all this together? And from there, I learned about continuous mixes and got a double tape deck, had 2 cassette tapes. These two cassette tapes, had them put them in the tape decks, played the CD, and was actually trying to make a continuous mix of certain tracks on certain CDs. I mean, I didn't have a recording studio back then. I didn't know anything about recording studios, so I had to work with what I had. And learning about how to keep time and trying to time the tracks right to make it a continuous mix is when I really started getting into making music. But wanted to say age 16, Justin, you mentioned about Fruity Loops. Age 16 was when I got my computer and bought this.
Damn!
Before they became FL Studio, got Fruity Loops 3. Still had the
wow.
Still got the software, all that stuff.
Wow.
So, like you, Lars, I did not want to get too many sentiments with it. This is what started everything for me. Before getting a computer and starting working on Fruity Loops, I still had to work with what I had. I wanted to make music, and I still using that same Casio keyboard that my mom gave me. I started making my own melodies and wanted to make my own beats, but I had no recording studio to record my compositions. And so I worked with what I had. I created my own recording studio with a PlayStation back before it was even called a PS1. An original PlayStation, a VCR, and my Casio keyboard.
Wow.
And
limitation forces innovation, doesn't it?
Yes, it did. I just rigged my own recording studio and recorded my first song on a VHS cassette tape. And I used the CD player on the PlayStation to keep the time, to track how long my tracks were. That was my very first recording studio that I created. And I think my mom still has that VHS tape back in Georgia. So I have to ask her for that. Hopefully I can have you guys listen to it and see what it looked like. But yeah, that was the first time I recorded my first song. And from there, got the Fruity Loops 3, and I started making music from there.
But all those previous experiences had set you up for that point.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Having asked that, who were your biggest influences in music?
Biggest influences. The first influence for me was Ben Watkins of Juno Reactor. Hearing him and his composition on the Mortal Kombat soundtrack, I got more interested in his music and learning. It was through his music where I learned about ambience, trance, and actual electronic music, the or the boots and pants and boots and pants and boots and pants. That's when I started learning that beat and how the kick drum really gets you moving. But he was my first influence of making electronic music. After Ben Watkins, my next influence in music making is Praga Khan of Lords of Acid. And Praga Khan is also the driving force of the band called The Immortals, which is the band that created the Mortal Kombat theme song. And Praga Khan, what drew me to him was just his creativity in electronic music. He was the one artist that got me beyond the basic electronic dance beat, beyond the He learning the different variations of how drums can be done, but still can get people to dance. And then learning more about synthesizing and just the sounds of acid and just the electronic sounds. He was, I guess, was more the evolution of me making electronic music and trying to really understand from the production side of what he does in order for me to evolve in my music production. After Project Con, it would have to be just the Crystal Method, because it was getting more into electronic music, but then actually bringing in real instruments like a guitar or actually using a drum set to develop and create electronic music beyond what I guess that synthesized acid sound. Because with Crystal Method, the way their sound resonates to me is it sounds like they actually use real instruments to make electronic music. And because of that, that was more inspiration for me to use more real instruments, world sounds, like a ukulele or like a kazoo. Just use anything, or a simple triangle even.
Don't forget about the pans, man. Don't forget about the pans.
The steel pans. Using actual instruments into electronic music. And Crystal Method was the one who made me realize I can actually do that in electronic music. My final influence, even to this day, is Clayton from Cell Dweller. With him, I would say he is even a step up higher than Crystal Method, because he is a one-man band who uses any kind of real instruments in his music, but also infuses industrial electronic sounds in his music. But what really draws me to him is his manipulation of sound. He, to me, can truly show how sound can be an art. And he creates such very unique sounds that I cannot hear anywhere else. And his music is the one that introduced me to the glitch sound effect. And it was through his music that inspires my music today.
Thanks for sharing. So, what would be your favorite album of all time?
Ooh, yeah, I struggled with that one too. That's a tough question, but my favorite album, I would have to say of all time, is the Crow soundtrack. With the movie, I love the storyline of the movie, and rest in peace, Brandon Lee. It was Brandon Lee's final movie. He died during the making of that movie, and on set even. And hearing his story and knowing the storyline of The Crow, I just love that movie so much that I had to get the soundtrack in remembrance of Brandon Lee. That soundtrack, first off, introduced me into understanding rock music. And learning how music is mainly universal. Either you feel it or you don't. And listening to that entire soundtrack, it might have to be because of how the soundtrack even starts with a song by The Cure, and hearing how just that song, the guitars, the feel of the guitars, the feel of the vocals of Rob Smith, I guess it just sets the tone for the entire album. And because of that, I draw and lose myself in that entire album. And that, I would have to say, the Crow soundtrack is my favorite album of all time.
Excellent. Awesome. So what was the first actual song you made? Not like a demo or experimentation, an actual legitimate full song you made.
The first song was going back to my story of recording my first song with that VHS tape. I actually redid it and made it into what is now called Utopia. off my album Cyberworm of the Oracle that was released in 2015. And that particular song, I would have to say, was my very first song that I actually made, even though it was released a lot later.
So I guess that ties into the next question, your first full-length album. Would that be it?
Actually, no.
No? Okay.
My first full-length album is called Only the Beginning, that I released in 2011 under the alias Aphonic Oracle. And the reason that I titled that Only the Beginning was because it was my first album, and it was only the beginning of my music making. I mean, this was the start of my music expedition, and I was very proud of releasing that.
What was your first live performance?
My first live performance was on a set of drums, my very first drum kit, even though I was in my 20s when I received my first drum kit. But my first live performance was in a church, because I was the musically inclined member of that church. They had me on drums to actually keep the rhythm going for the entire church to sing, to dance, and these were the actual drumsticks that I used.
Still got them, eh?
I still got them, and these were the drumsticks I used in the church.
All my first drumsticks broken.
They're gone. You were rocking out with those drumsticks.
I was playing hard, yeah. What was your most meaningful composition?
My most meaningful composition is a song called Downcast. And it was one of the first ones I've actually created with Fruity Loops 3. And back then, I was really just still trying to get key signatures right and just trying to learn how to really put compositions together. With that particular piece, it was during my dark times when I was feeling alone, rather distant, and Downcast was a piece that I did in a minor key. It sounded orchestral, it sounded very sorrowful, yet very epic. And I recently redid Downcast and released it last year in 2018. But it's only a minute and a half long, but because of the impact that I always feel every time I hear it, it's my most meaningful piece that I've ever made.
Very nice. Okay, so what was your favorite collaboration?
My favorite collaboration was actually more recent than I would even expect. It was sometime last year. This woman named Ember Rose Love actually sought me out. She learned that I'm a music producer, and she actually wanted a couple of her songs redone. And so after listening to some of my stuff, she wanted to actually take on the opportunity of working with me. And the very first collaboration we've ever done was redoing her song called 50 Ways. And that song was the very first song I've ever done where I was all about rock and metal and had that very fuzzy guitar sound with hard kick, hard drums. It was very punchy, and I had a lot of fun going beyond my usual electronic synthesized, just my typical electronic sound. This was not electronic at all, and I actually had fun broadening my horizon in my music production. 50 Ways by Ember Rose Love was my favorite collaboration.
Okay, so having said all of that, what is your creative vision for the future?
My creative vision, I think about it a lot actually, and it goes beyond music production, because of course I want to just continue making music, keep going, and building ILP beyond what it is now. But something I still constantly imagine myself, especially now that I have a daughter, is teaching kids the art of sound as a creative outlet for them, but not be an actual music teacher at a school, because I don't think I have that kind of patience. But want to at least introduce music as an outlet for kids to engage in their creativity, work their mind to be creative.
Right on.
Nice.
Well, thanks for sharing all that, Malachi. And let's move on to Kyle now. So, Mr. Kyle Rushworth, what age did you get into music, sir?
I can remember listening to music all the way back to some of my first memories. Like, music has always been something. Talking with my mom about this, she actually told me that as a baby, I'd only fall asleep if music was playing in my room. So there was always music going in my room as like a little baby, and then I'd sleep right through the night. When it comes to actually being old enough to like remember certain songs, or like the act of putting music on and listening to it, I'd say I was probably about 6. And my dad came home with the brand new Sony 10-disc CD changer cartridge machine. Like, it was like, whoa, go team, we're balling now. We can put 10 CDs at one time. Like, whoa. So I got memories of loading that thing up with a whole bunch of CDs, putting it in, and then just playing it. And I think the most memorable one for me would be Michael Jackson, man. I loved Michael Jackson. I thought he was just the greatest.
Yeah.
And
Rest
when
in peace.
when my dad was not home, my mom always listened to Paula Abdul, man. This Cold-Hearted Snake song, I can still like vividly remember that song. It's like
cold-hearted snake.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
yeah, etched in the mind. So, that's probably about when the love for music
Stopped.
well, probably I'd say like that's where it started. I used to take my mom's little I guess it's not little, her 12-string Fender guitar around the same age and sit there on a chair and just like strum the strings. Even though I probably wasn't making much music, I thought it was music to my ears anyways. So it's probably about 6 years old when it all started.
Okay, so who would you say are your biggest influences musically?
This is a bit of a tough one because I didn't really have a favorite band, group, artist. I was kind of always am not indecisive, I guess. So I didn't really have a favorite. At one point, back in like grade 6, beginning of grade 8, I loved the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. And I started a little boy band with 2 of my friends, called ourselves the Lost Loves. We're writing writing lyrics and singing. I still remember the song like to this day. It's like,
I was not in that group.
No. At that point, Justin was in his garage, like drumming to Korn. First time I ever heard it was him smashing on the drums. I'm like, who is this guy? I'm scared. And then shortly after, like that little NSYNC phase, I found this artist named TQ. Probably one of the most underrated artists in the world.
For sure.
Man,
Oh yeah.
in my mind, that man is a legend, and he doesn't get any of the credit. Yeah,
OG
doesn't get
for
any
sure.
of the credit he deserves, because like that man touched my soul with that like rap,
Sangin'.
rap sangin' is what we called it.
Yeah.
That was definitely a major influence and part of what made the shift into more of rap instead of pop. Following that, I kind of got into the more of the rap, and it was like Snoop Dogg, obviously Tupac,
DPG,
Dr. Dre, DPG, Corrupt, all those cats were like top of my rap list. My first rap album was Master P though, Ghetto Dope I think was the name of the album. I bought that. It was the first one with like parental advisory sticker. I had to like hide it when I got home.
Put some headphones on. You're like,
Yeah.
going around.
Get Ghetto Dope. From there became Eminem, of course. I think every white kid in the suburbs at one point, like,
And their
influenced.
and their Sunfire driving,
Yeah.
banging 8 Mile.
Exactly. Those are probably my biggest influences for sure.
out of all them, I guess, and what was your favorite album of all time?
Here's where it'll kind of flip the script. Later on in my life, I made some worldview changes. I became a believer, a Christian, a believer in Jesus Christ. And a lot of that music no longer really aligns with the way I want to represent myself or what I want to be thinking about. And Justin actually introduced me to a Christian rapper by the name of Trip Lee. And I would say that now, at this point, my favorite album of all time would have to be Trip Lee, If They Only Knew. To me, that's like an album that was anointed by God. Every single track is a banger. It has a great message, and if you're a believer, it'll give you strength to believe. That when I first came to Christ, that was the tracks, the music that still let me keep that edge, that little bit of like G feeling that I always had, but had a good positive message. So, you know, hands down, I'd have to say that's probably my favorite album of all time, because it was there at the most important part of my life, I think, and it was a staple of keeping me on that path. So that's it for sure.
Shout out to Trip Lee.
Yeah, man. Thank you, Trip. You know, some of your new stuff, I don't know, but If They Only Knew was a sick album.
Okay, so what was your first instrument that you played?
I think I mentioned a little bit my mom's 12-string Fender, but I never really got any good at it. Still have a guitar. Got a bass guitar. I got a little keyboard, or a MIDI controller. My apologies, Justin. I know you correct me every time. So, you know, I got a few. The one that I really learned probably was a piano. My mom bought me a little keyboard, a little Casio keyboard, and I taught myself with little piano books to play. So that's probably the first instrument I really started to play, and I still like playing around on the piano or the MIDI controller.
What was the first song that you composed or produced?
Well, there's a few in those lost tapes, as Justin already referred to. The first track that I ever rapped on and recorded was with Justin, and I can still remember the lyrics.
I'm working on some rhymes, just trying to pass the time. I wanna make it mine, line after line, and time after time, again and again. I'll make your mind bend, I'll be bringing a new trend.
It was like, I was so trying to be like Snoop, and I thought I was so dope, you know? So yeah, that was the first rap track I ever made. And then I guess the first beat I ever made, like actually composed the music, probably like full on, didn't use any loops, didn't use anybody else's stuff, was probably a track that I titled Daddy Time. It's just an instrumental piece, but I think that was probably the first one where I did everything myself with no help from Justin over here, who would sometimes, you know, give me some drums to start me off.
This is true. What was your first live performance?
All right, well, I totally had forgot about this. When I was thinking about it, I had NA beside it, but hearing everybody else's stories jogged one for me, and it goes back to 8th grade. The three of us up on stage, 4 of us actually, singing Backstreet Boys, As Long As You Love Me, at the grade 8 talent show. And actually, I'll never forget that. When I think about it, the feeling of like being up there, everyone's like waving their hands back and forth and like standing, and I'm like, wow, I'm a superstar, whoa. Then I realized I didn't make this song. They're only standing because they love the real guys that made this song. All right, so that was probably that's my first live performance, and I haven't really done a live performance since, other than spitting some tracks me and Justin made together for some girlies back in the day, giving them some live performance to woo them with my styles.
Got a couple of those.
Yeah.
Okay, what was your most meaningful composition?
I'll have to go back to that first real track that I made, and that's the track I called Daddy Time. and it's just a real soft instrumental piece where I'm just playing the piano, and it has there's some emotion there. It's a still.
Did you make it for your son?
No, I made it. I just made it, and when I was done, the reason why I named it Daddy Time is when I listen to it, it's calming, and it puts me in that place where that's the mind state that'll make the best dad. Like
so it'll take you to a place that'll make you an efficient father.
Right. I can get into that. Okay, everything's calm. There's no pressure. There's no anxiety. It's like clear thinking. Okay, I'm ready to interact.
So it's a preemptive strike towards anxiety and whatever
pretty
else.
much, yeah.
Okay, what was your favorite collaboration?
That one, hands down, that's the easy one. It'd be my track that I made with you, My Redeemer.
It seems that lately I struggle daily to understand he who made, the one who saves, the world that raised me, a little baby without a hope. 28 years later, finally reading what you wrote. I was gone for so long, but now I'm here. I'm sorry, Father, it's only you that I revere.
Remember when I got you to make me a beat, and you threw a beat together real quick? You're like, I've been playing this guitar lick for a while here. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. I'm like, can you record that and make a beat out of that for me? I want to write a song. So yeah, he did. He just put that all together for me, and then I wrote all my lyrics and spit it, and then he produced it all for me. And that track
it was heavy for you.
Yeah, it was a heavy track, and it's the whole thing's about Jesus and like my walk with God. So it was a big track for me. It was a big deal, and it's probably one of my favorites for sure.
What is your creative vision for the future?
Well, for the longest time here, I put a pause on music, and I'm like, I don't make music. What am I doing? I'm not a music maker. And something was missing. So, I went out and got myself a tower. I dug out the old microphone out of the bag that it was in, and all my instruments that are just lying around my house that I don't play, and got that FL Studio rolling. And the vision for the future is to just get back into it and start creating.
Just create again.
Yeah, get those tracks like Daddy Time going again, where I can just put my soul onto the keys and get that emotion, that feeling, whatever, out of me and into another medium, so that I don't have to carry that.
Right.
And then
so that's the key, right? Is getting back into it for you.
Yeah,
making music for you.
For therapy. That's my therapy. Music therapy. Self created. And then once I'm back in rhythm and I'm going and I'm comfortable and I'm making it without struggling, then I'm going to start banging out some beats and making some Jesus raps on the Jesus tip. I really want to do that. That's something that is really important to me, and I'd love to make a full album like that.
So basically, Trip Lee is to you what DMX is to me.
Yeah, I guess so. Like, yeah, I loved DMX too. DMX is probably the original guy that I heard that, but at that point in my life, I wasn't listening like that. So what X was saying was falling on deaf ears. And then, by the time I kind of started looking in that direction, Trip Lee showed up on my radar, and then I could really get invested in what he was saying. So yeah, definitely. Yeah, Jesus raps all the way, man. That's what I want to do.
Hey, man, lots of people do it, a lot of people do it well. So like DMX, like Trip Lee, like there's a whole bunch of people that do it. They're just not on the radar. They're just not on the mainstream radar. That's all.
That's right. That's what I got all y'all ILP cats for, right? You'll get my message out there, won't you?
It'll cost you.
All right.
Well, we'd like to thank everybody who tuned in to check out this podcast, and we do apologize for the delay. There's a couple things going on. Malachi just had his baby girl. Micah is her name, right?
Yes.
Micah, baby girl. So he's been busy with young, rapidly growing infant. Yeah,
So the delay was my fault. Sorry.
it's all Malachi. We're putting it all on Malachi's shoulders for this one. But we're back in full swing, and the plan moving forward now is every 2 weeks. We're going to get back into banging one out every 2 weeks. So 2 weeks from the release date that you can see in the video description is when you can expect the next podcast to come up.
I just want to say the words of Stevie Wonder, that music is a world within itself with the language we all understand.
It's a universal language for sure.
Yep.
That's Look, we have this little pocket knives with the...
Nice. Okay.
We got one like that here too. It's like a...
Yeah, I knew he was coming with that.
Yeah.
Hey, I've got one too.
All right, just calm right down. I think we pretty much covered it all. I just want to invite y'all to join me in the mystical forest, and that's about it.
Join us next time in the mystical forest. Well, Kyle will have more forests. See what I did there? See what I did there?
Nice.
All right, I love it.
Spoken like a true lyricist.
That's right. All right. See you guys next time.
I'm out.
Bye.